my story with addiction started in childhood. I say I went into rehab at the age of 3 and I didn't leave until I was 18. And the reality is my parents worked in that ministry throughout my childhood. And really that was where I think I just saw how clearly recovery is possible. It happens best in community, and Christ is the most significant beneficial bedrock for any kind of recovery. I think for me, the most profound thing, I never expected to end up in this world myself. I think the thing that really shaped me most profoundly and was the sort of seed then for a longer term involvement was my journey with addiction and recovery began immersed in a recovery community. And so for me, I had to learn the backstories of the guys I'd come to know as intelligent, capable, loving, passionate, purpose-filled people, and I think it's always left me with just this profound confidence that recovery is absolutely possible, and that there's the seedbed for me is just the realization, hey, this is totally a possible thing. Addiction around the world, all the features change, but it's stealing lives around the world. It costs the global community twice as much as cancer to deal with addiction. It's a global thing. What's the commonality? What underlines that? Everywhere you go, underneath the addiction itself is a set of problems. And the addiction takes root and it grows because it's solving an underlying set of problems. I think one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves when it comes to addiction is not why the addiction, but actually why the pain that underlies this addiction. Wow. And it doesn't matter whether you go to Bolivia, to South Africa, to Nicaragua, to the UK, to the US, and across the country. Underneath it, there's that same thing going on. There's a set of questions that the addictive behavior is answering. Every story is different, and this is a really personal thing that's happening, and the reality is that takes time. But as we're looking at addiction and recovery, for me the key question is, okay, what are we recovering from? And there's both the actual addictive behavior, whether that's to gambling, to porn, to drugs, to alcohol, it doesn't matter what it is. There's a habit that's developed. There's a track of thinking that's really become very strongly embedded. So the first question is, okay, how do you recover from that? Because that's the first recovery. And what's needed? What's needed in terms of counseling? What's needed in terms of community? What's needed in terms of spiritual renewal, in terms of healing from past hurts? And so that's the relationship, but then there is this relationship with the underlying issue. What was driving this? And I think at a national level, we sort of talk a lot. There's a Scottish proverb that says, they speak of my drinking, but not of my thirst. And I think we tend to talk a lot about the drinking, about the drugs, about the porn. The question really is, okay, why the thirst? And at a social level, as we look around us, there's some key features, we're hopeless. There's a lot of hopelessness. There's a lot of people who at a very personal level think, I don't know what the future holds. I don't really know what I'm all about. When you talk to people who are in recovery, so often they will say emptiness was the feature of their lives prior to addiction. They felt something was missing. There was a hole. Hopelessness, emptiness. This sense is a massive correlation between adverse childhood experiences and addiction. And so, why the pain from the trauma of perhaps abuse, perhaps addiction in the family, perhaps divorce, lots of things that drive us. And then, socially, we're a very isolated society these days. Many of us, especially post-pandemic, are deeply disconnected. The whole sense of you go it alone, the whole sense of you live independently, the whole sense of I don't need anyone, actually at a fundamental level, that makes us incredibly vulnerable to addiction. Wow. Incredibly vulnerable. Similarly, again, we're a very religious society in many respects, and yet actually I think many still struggle with there's a deep emptiness, and there can be a superficiality to some of the ways that we live and some of the ways that even as Christians that we do church that actually don't allow people to develop that deep depth of relationship and connection with God. And I think the pandemic's flagged stuff up to us that was already there. We're looking for escape. You know, we're looking for healing. We're looking for comfort. We're looking for connection. And again, I think one of the most important things we need to understand that is addiction doesn't develop overnight. You know, you're not addicted the first time you look at porn. You're not addicted the first time you even whack up heroin. You know, it takes time. But what's driving that is a real need for solutions to real problems. And I think if we can come at this compassionately and say, hey, why do you need to escape so much? What is it? Why do you lack so much for community, that the community you're finding in your using and in your addiction is so powerful? Yeah, it's so difficult. You know, I used to work in the UK in a rehab and had far more direct contact personally with the families of those dealing with addiction. And that challenge of what's the thing that I can do that's going to help the person I love is really, really, really tough. There's this difference between caregiving and caretaking. And I think one of the keys is to understand, you know, when am I stepping in to do something for my loved one that they can be doing for themselves? That's not helpful. When am I helping to create conditions that indirectly help my loved one, give them a sort of recovery capital to build on? But more broadly, I like to use and think about, there's a phrase in AA which is so helpful for those in addiction, which is, no one can do it for you, but you can't do it alone. No one can do it for you, but you can't do it alone. And I think for the loved ones, for those of us who walk alongside, that is every bit as true. And my kind of heart cry for everyone who's walking closely with someone in addiction is that they have their allies. They have their people around them who'll support them, because they're loved, they're valued. They don't exist simply to serve the recovery of their loved one, but they're passionately committed to trying to find solutions and find help. And that's not something you can do in your own strength. You need God's presence, and you need the presence of good people in your life. We've got to contend with the fact that recovery is a long-term process, and people will relapse, and that is reality. And I think the sooner we get our heads around that, the better. But as the church, what can we do? I think two things. One, we can bring those who've got recovery experience right into the heart of our church and its leadership. So I talk about the need for recovery champions in every church community, and that's vital, that those who actually get this stuff and have the experience are shaping the way we do everything, and are connecting us with all the external services, and are just creating a visibility for addiction, and creating a sort of shame-free environment where actually, because this isn't just about those who are deep into addiction, it's also about those of us who are on the slide in. So, you know, talk about the need to be addiction preventing, recovery promoting communities. And actually, we need both sides. So that's the really practical thing. I think the other thing we can do is really just ensure that as church communities, we all understand what we're dealing with here. And there tends to be a lean one way or the other. There tends to either be a lean towards saying, okay, this is all about therapy. This is all about 12-step groups. This is all about relapse prevention planning, and what I call the strategies and the tactics of recovery.